Two cups of coffee sit side by side. Steam rising like secrets we can't hide. The sun crawls in, paints gold on the wall. A puff of smoke, a sigh so deep. Dreams awake while the world's asleep. Two cups of coffee, the sun and a puff. Is this morning enough? Is this morning enough? Sip slow, let it linger, don't rush the hush. Two cups of coffee, the sun and a puff. A sparrow lands where the shadows lean. Cracks in the pavement, whole stories unseen. Your laughter stirs, breaks the morning spell. The air so thick, it almost hums with everything said and left unsung. Two cups of coffee, the sun and a pup. Is this morning enough? Is this morning enough? Sip slow, let it linger, don't rush the hush. Two cups of coffee, the sun and a puff. Yeah.
Oh, no, we don't. Stop. What's up, everybody? How you doing? Bro Joe here, and welcome to the GenX Cafe. No one's come in yet or viewing yet, but that's okay. You can watch this later. And I'm gonna try to get through this quickly. A couple of videos I started watching, and I figured, you know what? Let me do this on pause and share it with others. I'll put the speed up just a little bit, just to avoid any kind of copyright issues, even though I don't think they will complain, since I will put their links to their channels if you care to join. Of course, I don't agree with everything I shared. I'm just sharing their opinions, their presentations, because they're usually pretty concise. So, yeah, a lot going on, folks. And, I knew there was a whole thing going on with the bond market as far as with Japan and how they started raising rates and the whole carry trade with the U.S. Yeah, Japan's rates gone up. And so that whole carry trade is unattractive to everybody, but Japan was put in the spot. Some other things I was not aware of what was going on between China and Japan, which I think is the catalyst part of the catalyst. Hey. So I'm going to let Nick. I'm going to share Nick Benento's video. Okay. Nick Bensino. Sorry, Nick Bensino. I might fast forward some parts because it just becomes old hat. It's just a rehashing of, the what treasuries do, the importance of gold, and all that stuff. I want to get past that. We'll see. All right. So this is Nick, and there's a link. Alrighty. And I'll stop for comments. Yeah, I went through half of this already, but I figured, hey, you know what? This might be a good idea to go through other people. A lot of people don't know what the fuck is going on as far as the whole issue with the debt, the bonds, the gold. It's amazing, And some who do know are still sitting on their hands. I really don't know what you're waiting for. Maybe you're waiting for a dollar crisis. I don't know. Are you waiting for hyperinflation? Are you waiting for a crisis to then finally realize what you got to do? I don't know. That is human nature. But for those who fail to prepare themselves for failure. So here, I want to go to here. His latest video: China fucked Japan's economy. The U.S. saved it for now. Like like I was sharing before, Bessent last what was it, a week or two now already? How we were buying some of their debt, which is really buying our own debt. Really, really fucked up. We are in a bad situation right now. All right, let me Nick's gonna throw it at you. I love his shirt, allegedly. I never got those cups made or shirts a la Gadley. Remember a la Gadley back in the day?
Japan has been in the news a lot recently, and I've heard so many bad takes about how they broke their own economy and the US had to save them. That is wrong. China broke Japan. This all started in November last year with a single statement from the Japanese Prime Minister, which put Japan into an economic war with China that it was never going to win. But Japan was never really the target. This is China against America, and Japan is just where they are fighting it. And ultimately, it's America and the entire Western world who suffers the consequences if they lose. So if you've got a pension, a mortgage, or money in the stock market, this involves you. You just haven't been told yet. Let's figure this out together. First,
That's right. If you got a pension, IRA, you don't know where they're investing in their money. You need to pay attention. Mm-hmm.
need to understand how a country borrows money. When a government needs money, it borrows it from investors. You hand over cash, they hand you an IOU. They pay you interest every year and give back the initial investment at the end of the term. The interest rate on that IOU is the yield, and it's set not by the government, but by the people lending the money. If there's a lot of lenders, Japan pays next to nothing. If the lenders thin out, then it has to offer more interest to attract them. And for 30 years, Japan has paid next to zero interest. But who lends to the government at 0%? Why would you give them your money? Well, that's the thing. No one really did. Mostly, who was buying their debt was their own central bank. For years, they printed money and lent it to themselves, actually trying to create inflation and drag Japan out of 30 years of falling prices, deflation. That's the opposite problem to what most of the West has, where we have crazy inflation. But that created another problem. Now, half of Japan's debt is owed to Japan itself. They owe themselves money. Also, if you can borrow at 0%, it's basically free money. When you want to buy a house, you're limited by how much you can afford to pay per month on your mortgage. So maybe you could afford to borrow, let's say, $300,000 at 4% interest. But if you have 0% interest, why buy a $300K house? You may as well buy a $2 million mansion. A mansion's $2 million these days. They're probably more expensive. That's how old I am. Anyway, that's how Japan ended up with more debt than any other rich country on earth, over 200% of their GDP. Then it ended. In June, the Bank of Japan put rates up to 1% for the first time since 1995. So you've got your $2 million mansion, your rate resets, and all of a sudden you're paying $20K a year in interest. Not a good situation. But that is the situation Japan is in right now. And China is making it worse for them. Now, if you've seen anything about Japan lately, you've heard the explanation, and it's always the same one. Sanae Takaichi, that's the Japanese Prime Minister. I hope I'm pronouncing her name right. She won in a landslide in February, and people say she is spending too much. She's got a $2.3 trillion investment plan. She's borrowing like the last 30 years never happened to Japan. And all of that is true. She is spending enormous amounts of money, but nobody stops to ask the obvious question. Why is she spending it? Governments don't just triple their defense budget, strengthen supply chains, and stockpile minerals for fun. They do it when somebody is squeezing them. Japan is not spending because it wants to. It's spending because China has spent 10 months systematically dismantling them. Which brings us to the main.
That's China's way. Little by little, slow by slow. Don't draw any attention to yourself, as little as possible. Been saying this for so long. China is going to be at a war. The world war is an economic world war, and China is winning, and is not. This is they're winning a war and not firing a shot. Let's put it that way. Been saying this for long. China, and they're long term. And wait till you see. And then I found it's from another video. the deals that are going on with North Korea and Russia. Go look it up. Russia has now leased some land to North Korea for them to start farming. Unheard of. See, I had 3 or 4 viewers, and already 2 have already left. I don't know why. I don't get it. Because this shit is going to affect you. I don't understand. I'm just trying to bring light to you. Unless you know it already, fine, okay. But if you don't know what the hell, well, you're not. Ah,
Question for this video. What does it cost to say no to China? 16 years ago, we saw the cost, but that was just a prelude to what's happening right now. This happened in September of 2010. A Chinese fishing boat rams 2 Japanese Coast Guard vessels near a chain of uninhabited rocks in the East China Sea that both countries claim. The Japanese arrest the captain. Beijing demands him back. Tokyo says no. So China...
wow, Mad Pig. You must have been feeling me thinking about your last was it yesterday? Yesterday or the day before. I was like, where's Mad Pig Big? I haven't seen him around. I hope you're doing well. All right. I have to send you an invite. I started a new happy chat for our members. Thank you. Could be more focused. More focused. More about encouraging one another, more about sharing one another, more about helping one another, that kind of thing. More positive vibes. Yeah. So, next. All right. I know this might not sound positive, but this is news that we need to know so that we can be prepared. And it's all about being prepared and being aware of what's going on, the economy and stuff like that, because this is going to affect our pocketbooks. Come on, man. It's going to affect our pockets, our wallet, whatever, your bank account, your pension if you're retired or go planning on being retired. More inflation is coming, folks. You need to know that.
restricted the export of rare earth metals to Japan. Rare earths are 17 metals which nobody can pronounce, and they go into almost everything Japan is good at making. The magnets and electric motors, the ceramics and chip making, optics, lasers. You need tiny, tiny amounts, and there's no substitute for them. That's the problem. If you don't have them, you're screwed. At that time, Japan bought over 90% of their rare earths from China. And long story short, within weeks, Japan had to release the captain. I mean, they had no other choice. Their industry was being squeezed. A preview of what was to come 15 years later, kind of now, which is why Japan spent the next 15 years trying to make sure that this could never happen to them again. I'll go into more details later about how they did this, but the point is they got their dependence on China down from over 90% to under 60%, a third of the way out. But as I found out with my first divorce, a third of the way out is not enough. I don't know why I said that. I've never been divorced. What am I talking about? Anyway, last year, Japan found out it.
I like his quirky sense of humor too. So he seems pretty down to earth and real. Hopefully, good thoughts. Yes, good thoughts. I was just wondering where you were at. Ups and downs. Still on the lookout for that perfect partner. Well, we talk about those kind of things here too, and I won't get into it here right now. But there is no perfect partner, Math Pig. So stop your search right now. There is no perfect partner. There is no perfect person in a sense that they're, you know what they say. You want Mr. or Mrs. Right? Become Mr. or Mrs. Right. So just work on you being Mr. Right. And she'll be coming to you. You won't have to look about that. I preach to myself too, my friend. I preach to myself. I gave up looking at partners. I just want to have fun now, my age. Sick today. I hope you feel better. Run to the pharmacy. Now, I don't know what kind of cold you got, but that's what we talk about here too. It's all about health and wealth and wisdom. Gaining health, wealth, and wisdom.
wasn't enough. By the way, if you find this useful, I put together a free guide on how to retire by 2036. It's the whole framework that I use. It costs nothing. There's a link below in the description. And it also comes with my free weekly newsletter where I discuss subjects like I'm discussing in this video and more. Right, let's get back to Japan though. Now, all of that was 15 to 16 years ago, but what's going on today? That's what's important. So that started on the 7th of November, 2025, when Prime Minister Takaichi is being questioned in Parliament, and she is asked what Japan would do if China invaded Taiwan. She says that a Chinese attack on Taiwan is one of the few things that would trigger their military to get involved. That's all she said. But that's all she had to say. Beijing demanded she withdraw that statement, but she stood her ground. So China started dismantling the Japanese economy piece by piece. 4 pieces to be exact. Piece 1 came 12 days after her statement. China bans every Japanese seafood import. China was the biggest buyer of Japanese seafood. That one cost Japan about $500 million per year. Not a big deal when it comes to a country, you know. But in terms of angry fishermen that are going to vote, it's a different story. But Piece 2 came the same week. Beijing tells its citizens not to travel to Japan and warns students off of studying there. This is the one that actually hurt Japan, because within weeks, a third of the trips already booked were cancelled. Goldman Sachs put the damage at 0.2% of Japan's entire economy. And I know that 0.2% sounds like nothing, but Japan only grows at about 0.9% in a good year. So Beijing just wiped out a fifth of that with a travel advisory, which is crazy. But still, this is just a starter to what was really to come. Piece 3 was the main meal. February, China puts 40 Japanese companies on an export control list, banning Chinese firms from selling them anything with a possible military use. By June, that list had grown to include arms of Mitsubishi, Fujitsu, Hitachi, and others. And they
I'd say, do you want to mess around? You ain't getting no rare earths. You won't be able to build your fucking military or your fucking cars. That's the same thing here. People think like, U.S. military relies on China to process some rare earths to put into our weapons. Just think about that. And you think we're going to go to war with China? Oh, man. We can't even deal with Iran. And they don't even have a fucking army. Well, they have an army, but they don't have a military like China does. And we can't beat them. We can't beat Iran. Ugh. And Bessent, we watched Bessent's conference, which lasted only 17 minutes. 17 minutes was Scott Bessent's conference. That's between his presentation, his threat to anybody who does business with Iran. He gave a threat. They were going to do economic sanctions. He called it like the Pearl Harbor of economic warfare, pretty much, because he made the relationship to D-Day. And I gotta say, watching that, he was desperate. He was desperate. U.S. is desperate now. They're scared. We saw it in that conference yesterday. And just watch in the days coming, folks. More and more is going to start happening. Because now you have Congress coming back from vacation. September 9th is the new money printing. September 15th, the Federal Reserve meets whether they're going to cut or raise or just stay where they are. And I doubt nobody thinks they're going to cut rates. That would just send a very bad signal really right away. If anything, they need to raise rates. But then that makes the debt burden higher. But they know they need to do that to bring prices down. But it's going to hurt. Either way, it's going to hurt. Because we're cornered in now. And some people think we could just print our way out of this forever. Those Keynesian economists. All right, going on.
cut rare earths again to dozens of Japanese firms this time. Japan's
So glad I want to get through this quickly because I do have some things to do. And yeah.
own analysis says a full year without them takes 1.3% off of the economy. So take that 0.9% that I said in the good year. Tourism already knocked that down to 0.7%. If China ever turns the rare earths off completely, which they haven't done yet, but they could at any moment, that takes another 1.3% off, and then you're at minus 0.6%. That is a recession. That was the main cause. Then came dessert, by the way, a bit smaller, but piece four. In May, 2 Japanese employees of the same industrial company are detained in the port city of Dalian. Hopefully that's right. And they're accused of smuggling rare earths out of China. They were picked up weeks apart. Japan's government confirmed it in June and said it would respond appropriately, which is diplomatic talk for we can't do anything about it. Now, this one's hard to quantify.
Those guys will be stuck there. They're done.
What damage it does to the economy. But the net result is no Japanese executive wants to get on a plane to China anymore, which is kind of bad. And at a 2-day summit in Beijing, China's President Xi spent the most heated stretch of the whole thing ranting at Trump about Japanese remilitarization. American officials were stunned by this because it wasn't even on the agenda. So make no mistake, China was pissed and they went to war economically. And I'll give you a very real example of this. Yttrium. There's a lot of words that I'm going to struggle to pronounce today. Yttrium is one of the rare earths that China restricted. And China makes over 90% of the world's supply of it. Inside of China, it sells for $8 a kilo. In Europe, it's about $1,175 a kilo.
You believe that? Now, I don't know exactly what yttrium is used for. Let's, I'm going to look this up right now. Yttrium. Yttrium is a silvery white transition metal with the chemical symbol Y and atomic number 39. Transition metal often grouped with rare earth elements. It forms a protective oxide layer in air, though fine powder can ignite above 400 degrees Celsius. Common uses added to magnesium and aluminum to increase strength and heat resistance. In electronics and LEDs, used in white LED lights, camera lens glass, and legacy red phosphors. Wow. That is a big deal, yttrium. It also is a component in high temperature superconductors like YBCO, which is yttrium barium copper oxide. In medicine, the synthetic radioactive isotope yttrium-90 treats specific cancers like liver cancer. So, yeah. Sounds like yttrium is pretty important. And China holds most of it. You can get it there for $8, but not in Europe and probably not in the United States. And what did the U.S. Bessent again just say, right? And Bessent's question about this, I'll get to Eclipse, but Bessent comes out and says, yeah, you're doing any kind of business with Iran, be prepared. China does. China's their biggest customer. So you just made a big threat to China. And you have nothing to back it up. You know? Oh, they want to be part of the dollar system. Dollar system's dying.
Sorry, I measure stuff in kilos. I'm not going to do the freedom weights, whatever it is in pounds. I don't know. But the point is that's at 150 times the price in China versus Europe. And with Japan blocked from buying these metals, 6 Chinese companies making the exact same products saw their shares rise between 74 and 312% this year, taking the business that Japan used to have. So earlier, I asked the question, what's the cost of saying no to China? If you're Japan, the cost is your exports, your tourists, your supply chain, your staff, and your industry. That's what saying no costed Japan, though. But what it costed you comes from where Japan has to find the money. And a lot of that money is currently sitting in Western markets, but we'll talk about that soon. So put yourself in Tokyo's shoes. You've just watched a foreign government switch off your economy one.
Oh, and then they had the whole thing with the nuclear, Fukushima, right? Was a pretty large percentage of their energy. No more. They're relying on oil, which is more expensive now.
Piece at a time, because your prime minister answered a question honestly. What do you do? You do the only two things that work, and they happen to be the most expensive things that a country can possibly do. First, you rearm. Japan spent decades at about 1% of its economy on defense. Takaichi is driving towards 3.5%. This year's defense budget went over 9 trillion yen for the first time ever. That's about 57 billion US dollars. I'm going to start saying these numbers in dollars instead of yen. It's going to be easier for people to follow. So Japan's economy is about $4.3 trillion. Every 1% of it they spend on defense is another $43 billion a year. And they are talking about adding 2.5%. Call it 100 billion a year additional spend on their military. Okay, so what's the second thing that you have to do though? You rebuild every supply chain that runs through China, or that formerly ran through China. You build stockpiles targeting 180 days of the minerals you can't afford to lose. You introduce subsidies for recycling these minerals. You put state money into buying a piece of a mine in Australia so you have better access to minerals. You get the idea. They have to do all these things. These things don't make you money as a country, but they buy you the ability to say no to China next time, which is critical. And look, I know this seems extreme because if you add up the damage that China has done so far, it's about $10 billion per year. So why would Japan spend 10 times that, 100 billion, answering it? Because they are not paying for what China has already done. They are paying so that China can't do the rest. Remember those numbers. Japan grows at 0.9% in a good year. Tourism took off 0.2% of that. A full rare earth cutoff takes another 1.3%.
And now you put in a corner. It's crazy. This is nuts now.
And that puts Japan in a minus 0.6% recession. Whenever Beijing wants to play that card, 100 billion a year buys you insurance against that reality, and possibly the gamble that she's taking, it buys a better future for Japan. So Japan writes the biggest budget in its history, about $770 billion, and to pay for it, nearly $190 billion of fresh borrowing. Now, that borrowing would have been fine in the world that Japan lived in for 30 years when they could borrow for almost nothing, but they don't live in that world anymore. This is where the two halves of our story meet. When the Japanese government wrote this year's budget, it had to guess what its own borrowing cost would be, and it guessed 2.6%. Why did it guess? Why doesn't it just know this number? Well, remember how I said earlier that the government doesn't get to decide what its borrowing costs are. The government sells bonds to borrow money, and the lenders, the people who buy the bonds, who lend the money, decide the cost of borrowing. Well,
right. And the riskier it is to lend money, the higher the rates are going to go up. You know that on a personal level. If you have a bad credit score, you are going to get higher interest rates because you're a higher risk. And that's what's happening here. Everyone's getting higher risk. And that makes borrowing costs go up. The Japan 10-year right now is 2.89. That is, let me bring this chart up. Hold on. Of their bond market. Let's see, from the past, what was it, a year? What was it, about a year ago they started raising rates? Let me go 3-year chart here for you so you just kind of get an idea of how the borrowing costs are going up for Japan. This is their 10-year bond. August 2023. August 2023. 0.63%. Under 1%. That was how much they were paying out. That was their bond. So people were borrowing the money because they get this cheap rate, sell it on the under end to the US, make the 2-3% in between. That's called the Japan yen carry trade. Now that window's closing, as you can see, this went up. That window's closing, no longer attractive. People looking for other assets or other means of making money. So they go to other commodities or they go to crypto. And this is why you're seeing these rates go up and up. What's up, Sandy? You didn't see me go live just till now, so that's 7 minutes ago. Yeah, I know. I don't understand what's going on. That's why I try to play some music ahead of time. But I didn't play long enough because I just really wanted to get right through this. And I know it's already taking longer, but it's okay. This is pretty important. So let me go back to the video because there is another video I want to share with you. which is going to show the clips of things that Bessent said. And again, they're nervous. They're nervous. Treasury Department's nervous, folks.
Turns out that the lenders weren't happy with just 2.6% interest. They wanted more due to Takahashi's new spending. I say her name different every time. I'm very sorry. So before the budget was even finished, Japan had to change their borrowing cost estimates to 3%. And that 3% is now the number that their entire budget for 2026 is based on. But then last Monday, Japan's 10-year bonds hit 2.95%. Highest since 1996. It's settled back to around 2.87% since. So they are just this close away from their own accounts being wrong for this year. An analyst at Deutsche Bank called 3% a critical defense line for fiscal credibility in Japan. So Japan's finance ministry is working on next year's budget right now, and their expectation for next year is 3.8%. Now, remember what I said earlier about Japan? They racked up debt when interest rates were near 0%. Any guess how much debt they got in bonds at this point? About 7 trillion. Not yen, $7 trillion. Most of that is borrowed at an average of 0.98% interest. They can't pay it back right now, so they have to refinance that over the next decade. And they are now budgeting at 3.8% interest. So what happens?
They can't refinance it at that same rate because the rates just went up. So now to refinance that debt, they have to pay a higher rate. You see what's happening? It's the same thing. The U.S. It's a big fucking spiral. Vicious. And it gets quicker and quicker, exponentially higher and higher. We just hit the $40 trillion mark, right? And you know it's more than that because of all the future liabilities of Social Security, Medicare, all these, payments that are going to have to go out in the future. And then on top of that, Trump wants a fucking $1.5 trillion defense budget. You're fucking out of your mind. The empire is falling right before every falling behind. It's crumbling, and they're trying to do a controlled demolition and bring in a new system so they can avoid. Because that's the trick. They're playing a tightrope now. They're trying to avoid because if there's a crash or sudden, if it's too hard, you're going to have chaos. You're going to have riots. People ain't going to know what the fuck is going on. You might not be able to buy or sell. They got to avoid all that. So many people in the fucking dark. That's what I'm scared of. I'm scared of the people in the dark because these are the people you got to be worried about. And your neighbors, whatever. They don't know what's going on. And then when the shit hits the fan, boom, panic sets in. And people, they lose everything or lose a lot. They fucking lose their minds. So I want to throw this information out there so that people can be better prepared and so that we all just don't lose our fucking minds. And you can have peace of mind. Put a thumbs up if you're liking what I'm sharing. If you want to see more, share it with others.
Happens when you suddenly have to pay 4 times the interest on $7 trillion.
Oh, sorry. By the way, I'm sorry for stopping again, but I think the numbers around now, the U.S. with debt payments and stuff, stuff that is owed out within the year is doubled the income that's coming in. Something like that. The U.S. is bringing in, through tax receipts, it's about $2 trillion. But the expenses are like 5. It's insanity.
Nothing good, really. To be fair, it doesn't land in one hit. It's not like all of a sudden they have to pay that much interest on $7 trillion. They refinance a slice of that each year. But you can see the problem. There's a table on the data sheet that's included with this video. It should be on the screen now. Just on the debt they already owe, if interest rates stay this high, their repayments are going to double in the next 5 years, which is not good. It's not good. Imagine your repayments double. You have a loan for $10,000, you're paying $1,000, now all of a sudden you have to pay $2,000. That's not good. At the same time, the yen is completely falling apart. That's their currency. It went past 162 to the dollar. So $1 gets you 162 yen in June, which it hadn't done since December of 1986. And then it hit 164 in July, a 40-year low. And the problem with that is that Japan imports most of its energy and its food. A weak yen means that every barrel of oil costs more, which pushes inflation up, which pushes the yield on borrowing up again. They've been wanting inflation up for 30 years because they've been suffering through deflation. Now they got the inflation at the worst possible time. So Tokyo tried to fix it themselves. Defending the yen means that you spend dollars to buy yen, and they spent tens of billions of dollars doing exactly that. That was in April and May, and it bought them a few weeks. Then they started running out of dollars. And there's only one place that Japan keeps its dollars: American government debt. They are the biggest holder of US government debt on the planet. So they need to dump it. They need to sell it so they can get the dollars to save the yen, which is
Now, here, we got to listen. They got to dump the bonds. They are our biggest buyer. China right behind them, which has been slowly dumping their bonds over time. Quietly, like I said earlier. Japan now needs to get rid of stuff because they need some money. But what happens? They sell their bonds to the US. It's unattractive. The cost goes down. Oh, excuse me.
America's worst nightmare. America's own borrowing costs are already climbing on their own bonds, and Japan dumping US debt would send their borrowing costs even higher. So in July, Washington stepped in and bought the yen themselves. And that's China's plan finally reaching the US.
Bought the yen themselves. The US bought the yen to prevent them from dumping our dollar. I mean, that's what's going on here. All right, let me go back and go see that again. Oh man, scammers! These scammers. All right, hold on. Where was he? Okay.
Spent tens of billions of dollars doing exactly that. That was in April and May, and it bought them a few weeks. Then they started running out of dollars. And there's only one place that Japan keeps its dollars: American government debt. They are the biggest holder of US government debt on the planet. So they need to dump it. They need to sell it so they can get the dollars to save the yen, which is America's worst nightmare. America's own borrowing costs are already climbing on their own bonds, and Japan dumping US debt would send their borrowing costs even higher. So in July, Washington stepped in and bought the yen themselves. And that's China's plan finally reaching the US, finally reaching you in the West. It reaches all of us in the West, the US, Europe. It affects us all. And none of this is really working for Japan anyway. They spent $87 billion in 2 days trying to defend the yen, and all it did is had a brief recovery, and then it dumped again. Now, does this mean that Japan's going to collapse? That's what everyone's saying. No. People have been calling for that for years, for my entire career, for like 25 years, longer, honestly. That's not what this is about. Japan doesn't collapse. It just stops sending you its money. Because for 30 years, Japan has been the lender of the world. It's a rich country, but investing inside of that country gets you 0% return. So all of their money went to the US and to other countries. But now, all of a sudden, you get a few percent interest in Japan. I'll give you an example. At the end of 2023, America paid 3.88% interest. Japan paid 0.95%. So, of course, the money left towards America. Today, America pays 4.7% and Japan pays 2.8%. So the gap is closing. It's not quite there yet, but it's closing. And when that happens, your pension takes the first hit. If Japan starts selling its...
Understand that? There's that gap. Squeeze now. Not attractive anymore. That trade is not attractive anymore. So they need to go other places, people who are managing pensions and stuff, other places to make money. Especially if you're going to start guaranteeing people a certain return.
US debt, the price of debt falls and yields rise. Problem is, your pension fund bought those bonds when yields were low. So your bonds all of a sudden lose a lot of value because there are better bonds out there. And this isn't theoretical, by the way. In 2022, when rates went up, the main American bond index had its worst year on record, down 13%. Long-dated UK government bonds lost 40%. That's the safe part of your portfolio. Bonds are the safe part. And then your mortgage, that's another problem. The rate you're offered isn't really set by your government. It's set by what it costs to borrow money in America. And Japan has a massive sway over the price of that because they are the biggest holder of US debt. And China is squeezing Japan to make them sell debt. So if Japan stops lending money to the world, if they start selling their bonds, that number goes up and every mortgage in the Western world eventually follows it. Now, look, I know this all sounds like doom and gloom, and I'm not saying that any of this happens fast or that it actually happens at all. The US stepped in and saved the situation for now, but China hasn't stopped squeezing, and the US can't keep Japan afloat forever. I'm just making you aware of all the mechanics so you can understand it better. Now, the big question, what can you do about all of this? Honestly, there isn't much. Just make sure you know what you're holding so you can change things up if the situation deteriorates. For example, if you hold a lot of bonds and it's becoming clear that Japan is going to have to sell its bonds, you might want to get out of them temporarily, but we'll talk more about that in future videos. If you enjoyed this video, watch my video.
All righty. So you got the gist there. I have one other video. I know nobody's around now, but it's okay. You can watch this video later. This one is now this guy, I'm finding he's questionable, his information. But some of what he's saying here I've heard in other places. So take everything with a grain of salt. This one I might have to go regular speed because of his accent. It's sometimes difficult to understand. But I guess you're kind of getting, I don't know if he is Chinese or Japanese. I don't know. I'm sorry. Unthinkable. USA threatens China banks. Like I said, they did. That's what Bessent pretty much did. He threatened the China banks now because they're dealing with Iran. Right, just go in. Here we go.
All right, guys, so this is it. This is it. Now, what happens when you cannot win a war using your military? You move towards economic punishment and you weaponize your entire financial system against your enemy. Now, what
And that's what Scott Bessent just did yesterday.
happened this morning is truly unthinkable by any historical standard. The United States is officially upgrading economic fury to something called economic outcast. Now, this is the final gambit.
Yeah, Operation Economic Outcast.
Bring Iran to its knees. The US has lost patience and they are now weaponizing everything available.
Today, we are launching Operation Economic Outcast to foreclose every other option available to the Iranian regime. Treasury has mapped every node, every facilitator, and every network that Iran has used to smuggle oil and evade sanctions.
And it's called.
See, and I brought this up yesterday. Those two words that Bessent used to make sure to get to your brain, right? That there are criminal actions going on. We're going to stop them from smuggling oil, to avoid sanctions imposed on U.S. We're going to make sure Iran cannot sell its own resources to anyone they feel like it. So much for your free market, huh? So China's putting the squeeze on Japan, on us via Japan. And now we're trying to put the squeeze on China via Iran. And it's not going to happen.
Notice what it actually is. The US is not winning this war using the military. The bond market is collapsing. At the same time, the deficit is exploding out of control. Trump cannot continue this war for much longer, and he desperately really needs a fast resolution. Now, Bessent himself knows the economy is in deep trouble. The treasury market is.
Yeah, and watch your taxes go up, folks. Our taxes are going up. Or, what they're trying to do, where was it? Was it New York or something? They are going to try to they're going to tax the rich more. I know people love to see that. Tax the rich more. But you know what happens there? Consumer winds up paying the price anyway.
Is already sitting on the edge. And that is why he is considering using the Treasury General account. It holds nearly $1 trillion and he wants to fund the buybacks using it. And during his press conference, he made a significant admission. He has not bought a single bond yet through the buyback program. He knows exactly what that's going to signal to the markets. It would tell the world that the Treasury has completely lost control. It's going to trigger a immediate explosion upwards in bond yields. So he's holding back even as the pressure builds. Now, economic outcast is the final gamble this administration has left to play. Now, this we're at a poker table, and Trump basically showed hand. It's really alarming how far Bessent is prepared to push the envelope to corner Iran. But the US also cannot survive a prolonged war on the energy front. The physical oil situation is becoming dire. Now, SPR stockpiles have collapsed by 3.7 million barrels, with just 289.7 million barrels remaining.
I've been hearing for the longest time. We're weeks away. We got only so much reserve. I don't know. I don't know how much we have left. But I keep. Oh, man. Hold on. I don't know how much we have left, and I don't know if this is just some kind of narrative they're trying to send out there, fear. I don't know what they're trying. I don't know. But I guess it would be safe to say, let's just assume that the worst. If we could assume the worst, then at least, uh, you know, you, you be prepared, right? Some way. I don't know.
That is the lowest level recorded since 1982. The US is running out of options fast. Now, we are talking about potential economic chaos in a matter of weeks without a resolution. And if the war drags on even further, the United States will have no meaningful oil reserves left to release. They lose the ability to push crude prices lower on the physical market, and then inflation truly becomes entrenched, and there's no mechanism to fight it.
Yeah.
And the Fed cannot hike rates to contain inflation either. If rates go up, the national debt gets blown apart completely. So this is a perfect trap with no exit. Now, Bessent's threat this morning is unthinkable in scope. Any country or entity that helps Iran will be removed from the entire dollar financial system. This is a replay of the Russia 2022 sanctions, but going fully global this time.
Yeah. It's a replay of the sanctions against Russia. We did that. And what did that have to? That just emboldened them to, they were in the middle of BRICS already. BRICS was started to form in 2010 because they, pretty much were preparing for what the U.S. is doing. And then U.S. put sanctions, took Russian assets and their money, seized stuff. Then they're like, why are we going to be bothering the system? Why are we going to put our money and resources there and use that system if the U.S. can just easily just seize everything? And it makes every other country think about what they're doing. And that's why they have been developing and are developed a new system. BRICS. China has now the gold exchange in Shanghai and in Hong Kong.
If you're caught helping Iran in any way, a cascade of punishments is going to hit you. Your assets could get frozen, they could be potentially confiscated, and access to SWIFT will become impossible overnight. Dollar swap lines would also get cut off without warning. Now, connections to
Some are saying, folks, some are saying that the U.S. is doing this purposely. They are purposely doing this, and that might be the case. They're purposely demolishing the dollar. Again, a controlled demolition. Could be.
American banks would be severed completely. It's a threat designed to make most countries cower immediately. Now, the sanctions under this new economic outcast framework are massively expanded beyond anything previously seen. Over 60 entities, individuals, and vessels will be sanctioned in the opening wave. Now, 5 key areas are being targeted as well: digital assets.
Yeah, 60 entities and stuff. Oh, and by the way, when Bessent was questioned, he says, "Yeah, we got a number of these countries we're in touch with, and we're telling them stop doing business in Iran." And he's questioning, "Well, who are these? Who are these countries? Who are these entities?" And he would not tell him. He would not say. Not sure it's controlled, but it seems deliberate. Yeah.
Technology, gold, aviation, and shipping, they all come under the hammer. So the US wants Iran to have absolutely zero breathing room left. So there will be no tech imports, no assistance with the oil trade. Bessent also wants to prevent Iran from storing any assets in either gold or cryptocurrency going forward. And this measures on a single country is more severe than what was imposed on Russia. At least with Russia, there were waivers allowing Japan and Korea to keep buying Russian oil. But against Iran, there will be no exclusions and no bargaining at all. But even Bessent does not dare to impose all the sanctions immediately today. He kind of understands the massive threat this poses to the broader global economy. This is an economic D-Day that could blow up critical global financial systems.
Yeah, that's what he equated to D-Day.
He's also afraid of the full consequences of pulling that trigger too fast.
Why would I want to blow up the global financial system?
Now I think about that. He says that. Why would I want to do that? It's almost like someone who is guilty, right? They'll do that. Why would I want to do that? I mean,
believe that it is important to level set, but they should know that that will move very quickly and that we are serious. Secondary sanctions are a very powerful tool.
Now imagine being a foreign country and hearing that warning. You immediately realize this is potentially game over for you if your reserves are trapped in US bonds. It's crazy that Bessent has confirmed the US is sending envoys to every corner of the world. Teams from the Treasury, State Department, and even the US military, they're traveling globally. So they're demanding action from every country and they're giving defined timelines to shut down any activities with Iran. The ultimatum is being delivered in person to governments worldwide. They have to take it seriously because they hold over $9 trillion worth of US Treasury bonds.
top foreigners of hold U.S. debt. Here we go. Japan, number one. Oh, UK is number two. Looks like. Japan, UK, then China. And then we're looking at here Cayman Islands, Germany, Luxembourg, Canada. Other countries, 1.8 trillion.
Now, Japan is the largest holder with nearly $1.2 trillion at stake. The UK holds almost $900 billion. Canada sits on $470 billion in US debt. For all of them, immediate compliance is the expected response.
Wow, Brazil down 27%. They've dropped 20%, 20 over 25%. That's big. Even though it's the smallest number, it's still the largest percentage wise that they have gotten rid of it. And they're part of BRICS.
They're too deeply tied into the US financial system to resist immediately. Bessent might win the opening round of this confrontation against most countries, granted, but he may have crossed a genuinely dangerous line when he extended the threats explicitly to China. Now, when asked directly whether Chinese banks could be targeted, Bessent said every entity is now fair game. And that single statement changes everything about the risk calculation.
Secondary sanctions or penalties is Treasury prepared to levy against Chinese banks?
Every country, every entity should know that they should be prepared to face US sanctions. And no one is above this. We are going to hold everyone accountable, and this is economic asphyxiation of this regime. No one should test our resolve.
Now, targeting
Do you take his threat serious? I just don't see him that type, right?
Chinese banks is a very, very dangerous move. The blowback would not just create the US financial system,
Uh-huh.
it will break apart the entire American economy almost immediately. And
Uh-huh.
here's the fundamental problem that makes this just so dangerous. China
Happy 420. Happy 420. I know if you're watching this later on, if anybody does, it's not 420 there, but it is 420 here. Well, not here, but somewhere. UK, happy 420. And thank you for holding so much of our debt. That's it. Smoke bonds every day. Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. Smoke bonds every day. Cheers.
China is a massive buyer of Iranian oil, at least before the US blockade started. And if Scott Bessent excludes China from the sanctions, those will have no real bite at all. Iran, with full Chinese financial backing, could fight this war indefinitely. And American financial markets, they are running out of time to sustain the conflict. Now, will Bessent actually risk Chinese retaliation? Now, it appears he would actually risk it. He confirmed he could. Now, he stated during the press conference.
It's got Bessent, US. They're expecting China to go. Excuse me. Are they expecting China to go? Oh, we're so scared. Okay, we won't sell Iran. We won't buy from Iran no more.
Conference that no one is above the reach of US sanctions. So we must now prepare for severe consequences from China if Washington actually follows through.
China.
That no one is above the reach of U.S. sanctions.
No one's above the reach. Oh, really?
That if they facilitate transactions and are part of the ecosystem that turns Iranian oil into money, into repression, they will be targeted.
So he has painted himself into a corner
Yep.
on the world stage. Backing away from this threat would be deeply humiliating and create an entirely new set of problems. Now, going after Chinese banks will be catastrophic. It's going to be a very big error. Now, you're talking about some of the largest financial institutions on the entire planet.
Ever see a person that has nothing to lose? Oh, man. Get crazy.
China is four of the world's 5 largest banks measured by total assets. ICBC.
China's got the 4. I thought it was JP Morgan, to tell you the truth. I really thought JP Morgan was the biggest bank. Biggest Western bank. But if they're going by assets, it's China. Got the 4 largest banks. And you're going to threaten those banks? The stupidity. And then here you got JP Morgan, Bank of America, BNP, which is France. I don't even know. HSBC, I'm aware of them. Yeah.
Alone holds over $7.6 trillion in assets. That is 70% more than JP Morgan. It's more than double the assets of Bank of America. And is the US really willing to cut themselves off from that scale of capital? Is Washington prepared for the total financial decoupling from China? If Bessent sanctions major Chinese banks,
this is where the whole idea of him doing it deliberately comes in, right?
those institutions immediately cannot deal with US financial counterparts. Foreign investment from China is probably going to vanish overnight. It's going to collapse. Chinese capital stops entering US stocks and bonds completely. US companies with major operations in China is going to face an operational nightmare as well. So the self-inflicted damage will be enormous and largely irreversible in the short.
So I guess maybe I'm thinking now. I'm thinking if there's anything that you've wanted or might need in the future made in China, some kind of electronics maybe. I don't know. I'm thinking, do we buy it now? Because it might be more expensive later. Or it's or harder to get, if at all. I haven't bought memory cards in a long time, or flash drives. But I've heard the prices have like doubled, tripled. It's crazy because they need all the tech and memory for their data centers. All the materials are going there.
Term. And Bessent really doesn't want to face that. Now, what is truly concerning beyond the immediate financial damage is how China will retaliate. Now, unlike Japan, China has no obligations to keep holding US Treasury bonds, especially if Washington decides to cut China away from the dollar system.
Right.
Now, for many years now, China has been reducing their treasury holdings bit by bit,
That's
billions by billions.
Yeah.
They have brought them down from over $1 trillion to the lowest level since 2008. But Beijing still holds over $630 billion in US debt directly. And if you include Hong Kong, that figure rises to almost 900 billion. That is an enormous quantity of bonds that could suddenly hit the open market very suddenly. And can Bessent really risk triggering a Chinese bond dump right now? Absolutely not. China selling their treasury holdings would spike yields immediately. And it's going to take America's debt crisis to a whole new level, an even more severe level.
Yeah, to a whole new debt level.
You kicked it to a house!
Perfect drop for that.
Now, interest on the national debt is already tracking towards $1.4 trillion annualized. Imagine what will happen to that number if China dumps and triggers a cascade of selling from other major holders. Canada, the ECB, and BRICS central banks would likely follow very quickly. The selling would not stop with just China, it could evolve into a stampede. But what if China moves too slowly? That is the big question, isn't it? What if Bessent tries to freeze or seize Chinese assets first before Beijing can exit? Now, that outcome will be even more disastrous for the entire global financial system. Every country watching would panic. They would just dump their own holdings simultaneously in total fear. And here's what makes China's position so strong right now. Their cross-border interbank payment system, or SIPS, just hit record transaction levels. Now, SIPS processed a crazy 1.2 trillion RMB in a single trading day recently. And that single day saw 42,000 separate transactions get processed through the Chinese payment rails. The world is already moving towards the Chinese currency settlements for trade. Countries and companies globally, they are already buying and selling goods with China using the RMB. Now,
That's right. And I told you they're buying tons of gold, and now they're putting vaults around the world so they can do these settlements with other countries, backed by the confidence that there is gold in their countries, to back up the currency. What's going on?
what happens if Bessent actually punishes China and signals to the world that the dollar system is now a weapon against everyone? The migration to SIPS accelerates dramatically overnight. Every time the US weaponizes the dollar, China benefits from the fallout. And we can see this pattern really, really clearly. It's repeating everywhere. Trump's first trade war pushed countries towards China. The Russian asset freeze accelerated SIPS adoption globally, And the war in Iran has essentially done the same thing as well. The results are unambiguous at every single time. Washington weaponizing the dollar makes Chinese alternative payment systems stronger by default. Bessent is indirectly helping to build China's global payment systems with every single escalating threat. This sanctions campaign is going to be the ultimate tailwind for both China and gold. And if it actually pulls the trigger on the entire world at once, the consequences would be game changing for the dollar system and not in a good way. There's simply no coming back from that kind of move easily. Now, we must emphasize clearly that targeting Chinese banks will likely be the ultimate red line for Beijing. China would strike back hard and they will strike back fast against multiple fronts. We have not even addressed the supply chain risk or the rare earth export ban card China can just throw down.
Right. Oh, yeah, you want to sanction our banks? All right, you're not getting any rare metals. That's it.
And both of those weapons will be deployed immediately in retaliation. And it appears that the US has already made up their mind to escalate further regardless of the risk. Bessent just issued another unthinkable warning just recently, suggesting a massive punishment package could arrive as soon as this week.
And I would expect that you will see a major announcement of a financial institution being sanctioned by the end of this week. So,
by the end of this week. And you know how they love to give those kind of announcements on Friday. Yeah, at the end of Friday, at the end of probably the trading day. Yep. To give the markets a chance to digest it.
So guys, we have to brace for impact for this one. The consequences of what's going to come is going to be felt across every single economy globally. But as always, let me know what you think. Will the US really follow through and
Yeah, what you know I would think. Will they follow through? They might start small, but it's not going to end well. No, sirree. All right, folks. Let me know what you think in the comments section. Please give the cafe a thumbs up if you like this information, and maybe consider buying Bro Joe here a cup of coffee to help things going, or perhaps become a member. I'm going to open up a new chat. This way we could discuss these things behind closed doors and help each other out. Whatever, share the information. So yeah, we'll see you later on today. So meanwhile, may the force be with you.
Verily, the force within thee is strong. Heed it and conquer all.
And it's gone.